Chinese military will be training to invade Taiwan. China has major beef with Australia, and a Chinese rocket crashes into Earth. That and more on this week's China News Headlines. This is China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. You know, 2020 just keeps getting better. The PLA, the People's Liberation Army, is planning to hold large-scale landing drills near the Chinese island of Hainan in August. Those drills are a training simulation for an invasion of the Dongsha Islands, which are Taiwanese territory. My favorite Chinese state-run media, the Global Times, has a friendly reminder for Taiwan. They say the Chinese army can turn any exercise into action if Taiwan secessionists insist on secession. You know, those Taiwanese secessionists making the crazy claim that Taiwan does not need secession from China because it's already an independent country. But just because those training exercises aren't until August doesn't mean you can't use them to threaten Taiwan now. Landing exercises aimed at taking over islands have become PLA's regular training subjects. Dongsha, Penghu, and Taiwan are all islands. Nice islands you've got there. It'd be a shame if anyone landed on them using military force. The PLA is also currently conducting military exercises on China's northern coast, which may or may not be a warning to Taiwanese secessionists. Now, you might think, hey, instead of training for an invasion of Taiwan, shouldn't the Chinese Communist Party be more focused on fighting the coronavirus? Or maybe even that Black Death outbreak in Inner Mongolia? But no, the CCP is using the coronavirus pandemic to increase military pressure on Taiwan, according to a new congressional report. That includes holding military exercises near Taiwan last month. In fact, while the rest of the world is trying to help their own citizens not die, the Chinese regime is ramping up the pressure on all its neighbors in the South China Sea. U.S. warships even had to come to Malaysia's aid this week after Chinese pressure. So yeah, 2020 is great. The Chinese Communist Party is also waging a global war against anyone who criticizes the regime. Activists in Canada are being bullied. A student in Australia is facing expulsion for it. Incidentally, the vice chancellor of that Australian university got a $200,000 bonus for improving the school's relationship with China. And a Polish illustrator is facing death threats for her work on the coronavirus, the Tiananmen Square massacre, and the Hong Kong protests. And the British website she works for wants to fire her for it, unless she deletes this image from her personal website, which she refused to do. Incidents like these make it clear the world isn't suffering from the coronavirus, it's suffering from the CCP virus. Speaking of, look what activists from the anti-totalitarian Chinese Alliance projected onto the Chinese consulate in Los Angeles. Now, I don't know whether whoever did that is a fan of China Uncensored, but I'm definitely a fan of them. I'm also a fan of the U.S. Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom, Sam Brownback, because he just sent out a tweet that's guaranteed to enrage the Chinese Communist Party. He tweeted, "We strive to uphold the universal tenets of truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance, ideals that are fundamental to the expression of the Falun Gong faith, and we reiterate that no one should be persecuted for their beliefs, including Falun Gong in China." Oh man, I wish I could see former Chinese leader Jiang Zemin's face right now. Yeah, he's definitely upset. But the Chinese Communist Party isn't just threatening Taiwan or its neighbors in the South China Sea or activists worldwide. China also has beef with Australia, or rather, it doesn't have beef, because China has cut beef imports from Australia. You see what I did there? Yeah. This is big brain time. The reason China is cutting Australian beef imports is because Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison is calling for a global investigation into the origin of the coronavirus, which the Chinese Communist Party does not want, for some reason. But this is a friendly reminder of Beijing's ability to inflict economic pain. But hey, you know who's facing a meat shortage right now? The US. So now, the US is just buying Australia's extra beef. Now that could be some real win-win mutual cooperation without Chinese characteristics. So you may remember that the NBA has had some difficulties in China. Last year, Houston Rockets general manager Daryl Morey tweeted his support for Hong Kong protesters. And suddenly, the NBA's $4 billion China market vanished. But now, the NBA has a new CEO in China, and he needs to make up with Beijing. This is the new boss, Michael Ma. He's a Chinese national. Will that be enough to appease the Chinese Communist Party? No, at least according to the Global Times. Because what the Chinese Communist Party really wants is to be able to get Americans who criticize the party fired inside America. State-run Global Times spells it out. If the NBA wants to win its way back to the Chinese mainland market, it should properly handle Houston Rockets general manager Daryl Morey. Now, if you think there's no way the NBA would do that, remember, the NBA has already censored Americans in America from criticizing the Communist Party. Last year, some NBA fans began showing up to games in Free Hong Kong t-shirts, holding banners of support for Hong Kong and Uyghurs. In many cases, those were confiscated, and they were told they'd be kicked out of the game if they kept it up. Like I said, the CCP virus is everywhere. Now, many U.S. states, including California, Florida, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Missouri, are suing China in federal courts over the coronavirus. John Bolton, Trump's former national security advisor, says it's a bad idea because U.S. civil courts are not a good way to handle international disputes. But he does say the Chinese Communist Party needs to be held responsible, and that governments should put together something analogous to the Black Book of Communism. I think we need a Black Book of Coronavirus. Meanwhile, George Soros is warning against working with China on the coronavirus. In an interview with a German newspaper, he said, "There are a lot of people who say we should be working very closely with China on tackling the crisis. But I am not in favor of doing that. We must protect our democratic, open society." Which shows the Chinese Communist Party has done more than just bring Democrats and Republicans together. It's also brought together George Soros and conspiracy theorists. The White House has said federal pension funds cannot invest in Chinese stocks. To which you might be thinking, wait, federal pension funds were investing in China? Well, no, not yet, but they were planning to. But for some reason, the Trump administration thinks that's a bad idea. The U.S. State Department suspects China of using a Twitter bot army to spread disinformation about the coronavirus. Now, if you've ever used Twitter, you would say, yeah, obviously. But this is based on a new report by the State Department's Global Engagement Center, which, among other things, exposes foreign disinformation efforts. The report says these inauthentic Twitter accounts, ranging in the thousands, are being used to positively paint China's response to COVID-19 and to criticize anti-PRC content. However, Twitter denies this. And so I have to ask myself, who do I trust more, the government or Twitter? You know, I think the only thing I can really trust is that the Chinese Communist Party will keep spreading disinformation. Especially after this next piece of news. The CCP talks a lot about cooperation, especially over the coronavirus. And now, they're forcing that cooperation by hacking coronavirus vaccine research. Chinese hackers are targeting American universities, pharmaceutical, and other healthcare firms in a bid to steal intellectual property related to coronavirus treatments and vaccines, and the intrusion may be jeopardizing progress on medical research. Which, to be fair, is just the communist way of sharing. We steal your hard work and redistribute it to ourselves. The FBI just arrested a NASA researcher for failing to report his ties to China. He's being charged with defrauding NASA by failing to disclose that he held other positions at a Chinese university and Chinese companies, in violation of conflict of interest policies. This comes just months after a Harvard professor was arrested for sketchy ties to a Chinese university, which itself had sketchy ties to the Chinese government. And finally, on Monday, a massive, out-of-control Chinese rocket fell out of the sky off the west coast of Africa, becoming one of the largest human-made objects ever to make an uncontrolled descent to Earth from space. The 20 tons of Chinese rocket debris missed New York City by just 15 minutes. Instead, the debris crash-landed in the Atlantic Ocean, just off the coast of Mauritania. I hope it didn't hurt Mauritania's fisheries, the ones that China is already destroying. Over the years, the Chinese space program has shown great skill at creating dangerous space junk. In 2007, an anti-satellite test created a cloud of debris that still circles the Earth to this day. In fact, in 2012, some of it almost hit the International Space Station. And in 2013, it actually did hit a Russian satellite. The new US Space Force might have to spend a lot of its time cleaning up all the orbital junk China left in space. And now, it's the time when I answer questions from you, my loyal 50-cent army, fans of the show who support what we do on the crowdfunding website Patreon. Today's question comes from Brian Benjamin. Might get in trouble for asking, but are there any demonstrations being planned in the US to commemorate the Tiananmen Square massacre, or any other public gatherings against the CCP? Well, Brian, I don't think you'll get in trouble for asking that unless you're in China. Usually there's a bunch of different events planned throughout the United States to commemorate the Tiananmen Square massacre. But with the coronavirus pandemic, it might be possible there will be no large-scale demonstrations this year. The same goes for any other protests against the Chinese regime, even for their responsibility for the coronavirus. And if there aren't protests, that's a huge win for the Communist Party. Then again, maybe this year there'll be some kind of online alternative. And if I hear anything, I'll be sure to let you all know. Thanks for your question, Brian. And for all of you watching, if you want to stand up to the Chinese Communist Party and YouTube's censorship, consider joining the 50-cent army too. You'll have a chance to ask me questions on the show, and there are some other cool perks as well. Check out patreon.com/ChinaUncensored to learn more. And be sure to subscribe and check back every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday for new episodes, because YouTube isn't always sending out notifications about new episodes. Fancy that. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.